What is up, my friends? Today we're talking about one of my favorite times of the year, one of my favorite topics, and that is end of summer to early fall. Let's just call it transition. Not a true fall transition, but when we go from just, the end of Satan's wrath on us in the summer to like it's starting to happen, and we can kind of get the sense, we can look at the calendar and we can feel maybe a slight tinge of cool in the air at night. Things start to shift in bass's behavior, and we're going to talk about that time of the year and kind of a five-prong approach that we apply. Kind of everybody here applies it the same. The baits might be slightly different, so we're going to kind of break it down so that hopefully it will help give you guys a starting point, whether you're on a lake, whether you're on a river, whether you're in a pond, fishing from shore, from a boat, whatever. We're just gonna geek out on some gear that works really, really good this time of the year. So if you'd like to join in the convo, let's have some fun. Welcome to the Hookup Tackle.
Oh, what a stud.
Yeah. Look at that.
That was sick.
Cheers, my friends. Happy Sunday. All right, guys, some breaking news. What's new this week at the Hookup Tackle?
What a beautiful coastal fish.
Look at that.
Look at that gut on that.
That's a nice fish.
Welcome back, guys. I am Ben with the Hookup Tackle, a Tackle Otaku on Instagram, being joined by my no fun buddy, Jeffrey the King.
That's me in the flesh.
We should just call you Jeffrey the No Fun King.
That's me.
Yeah, maybe I'll start a separate Instagram.
Oh.
And just spam the shit out of everybody.
That's great.
It won't be a fake account. It'll
won't be a
me.
fake
It'll be a fan account run by me. This is actually a great idea. Stay tuned. We're the Hookup Tackle USA. You should change yours to Griff the all-nighter guy. Griff will not be in this video because he's gonna fall asleep. Yeah, he might fall asleep standing up right there. So welcome, my friends. We are talking about end of summer, early fall. One of my favorite times. Dude, I love when summer comes because I love the beginning of summer. And by the end of summer, I think I'm probably in the majority where I'm just done.
Oh, yeah.
I'm over it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we get it. It's disgusting. I'm tired of being disgusting.
Yeah, stop, please.
Can we just go to like some... I'm good with heat and sweating,
Mm-hmm.
but can we just have like a little bit of tolerance,
Come
right?
on. Yeah.
It feels like this year, every year feels like it just never ends, right? But I feel like this year, like everywhere I even look, everybody's still in record heat,
Yeah.
right? So, bass, when they have just been used to having their soul sucked out of them with 80 and 90 degree water temps, they will transition as soon as they get a little bit of relief. It's kind of like us, right? As soon as like, oh, it doesn't suck anymore, now I can go to the bar and sit outside, or go have coffee on my porch, or do something that involves having some life again, right? The bass kind of behave the same way. And this is one of my favorite times of the year because we're not to true fall transition yet, where the lakes have flipped and things are really starting to move in different places. We're still in summer, and we're kind of in fall, right? So we kind of get that magical time where it blends both seasons, which is one of my favorite times of the year because I can pretty much just power fish. Now, if you guys are finesse guys, look, you can always go and catch them on you throw a drop shot, throw a finesse worm, like they're gonna eat it, right? So you can certainly keep doing that. But what I'm talking about is this time of the year actually being able to throw some cool shit, and it works, right? So that's how we're gonna break it down. So my 5-prong approach really is pretty simple. I want to catch them on the surface. If they're not eating that, I want to catch them on something that I can burn and cover a lot of ground. If they're not eating that, then I usually go deep and I do the same thing. I burn deep. If they're not eating that, then maybe I slow down deep because I see them, or maybe I found something out in the top of the column and I want to pick it apart and I want to go a little bit slower. right? It's my 5-prong approach. So we're gonna start at the top and work our way down to the bottom. Sound good? Okay, so this time of the year, I am never gonna ever shoot a video in September or probably October where I don't talk about a buzzbait.
Yeah.
It's just, this is, to me, the best time of the year to catch them. Now, a lot of you guys live in areas where they start smoking this thing, you know, during spawn and post-spawn, but countrywide, this late summer, early fall transition is probably the best time of the year to get them on a buzzbait. So I keep this pretty simple. I like things that churn on the surface time of the year. If you guys are still experiencing open water schooling fish, then you're gonna probably wanna stay with a walking bait still. Something like a kick knocker, a gunfish, a Sammy, something that's gonna have some walk to it. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for fish that are really starting to transition with bait. So what happens is, you know, a lot of that bait, threadfin shad, gizzard shad, herring, a lot of those bait, they've been offshore because that's kind of been where that cooler water is. But the calendar, the moon phase, the longer nights, that little bit of tinge of cool to where it cools that, you know, shallow water, even just by a degree or two, can be enough to kind of trigger that bait to move shallow and get a little bit of a break, get some fresh air, right? Get a little bit of cooler temps. So what happens is we have all this bait that's deep, and all of a sudden, a lot of that bait is feeling it in the shallows, and so they move shallow. So we get a lot of food that's super shallow, and we get food that's deep. So we kind of have these two transition areas, these two different columns, right, as you will, that I'm trying to pick apart. So for that shallow movement, right, the bait moves shallow, bass are gonna follow. That's what I'm targeting with this. Okay, so if you guys are fishing a rockier, more reservoir style type lake, this is going to be something I'm going to throw right up on the bank, and I'm looking for those fish that are sitting right tight to the shore. So the first few feet of shore. If you guys are fishing more like a southern grassier area, then I'm looking for lanes, looking for edges. I'm looking for anything that's a defined lane to where bait can move up and those fish will move in. Okay. I pretty much stick with 3 colors for me. This is really a bait oriented thing. So I'm usually in some kind of white, which would be if they're really solidly feeding on shad, I pretty much always stay in a white. If you guys don't have shad, you're fishing a pond and it's more bluegill oriented, then I would go with a black or a green pumpkin here, right? Something that would be more of a bluegill. But if you're fishing a big body of water, white's usually my starting point. I will add in blues and reds and pinks if dragonflies and damselflies start to become a thing. So a lot of you guys will live in an area like out here. Usually as soon as we start getting those little slightly cooler temps, we get these like bright blue damselflies everywhere, and then we'll get these big like red and orange dragonflies. A buzzbait's an amazing way to catch fish that are feeding on those. You just have to kind of match the colors, right? So it's really just they're hearing the churn, they're seeing the red, they're like, oh, it's dragonfly, I've been eating them all week. They eat it, but it's got your hook in it, right? So this is usually my starting point. This gives me the ability to cover water really fast. I can fish quick. I can really get a sense for where there's bait, where there's aggressive fish, where there's bait and no fish, where there's fish and no bait. I can really get a feel for the body of water quickly. Now, the exception to this is if I'm fishing somewhere like Florida, where there really isn't a bank that I'm fishing, it's just more offshore tules and grass and that kind of stuff, then I'll switch to more of a plopper style. Okay, so the same thing can apply to you guys in, you know, California and Georgia, Alabama, anywhere where you have just big grass mats and those fish have been, you know, maybe chilling in those thick mats. Now we can really kind of target them on the edges, and a plopper style gets me a little bit more bites than a buzzbait. These can go hand in hand. If you guys are fishing from shore and there's a lot of grass, Jeff, I know you've been like hitting the urban stuff pretty hard over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and a lot of our urban lakes have a lot of grass in them, right? Yeah. So same kind of idea. The plopper style, I like the Evoke Zero. The 120 for me is a good, like, if I'm fishing from shore size, I go with the 120. If I'm fishing a bigger lake, you know, if I'm in Florida or you know, Clear Lake or something like that, then I would definitely go to the 150 size just to give myself a little bit more body. I like the Evoke Zero. You guys could use like the Whopper Plopper as well if you like. I just really like the way this one moves. I get that really nice kind of head shimmy, and then that blade's just a little different sound than what everybody else is gonna throw. I also find that it comes through grass really easy for me. I can give it one hard crank and that stainless prop back there just kind of rips through the grass and I'm back in action. Again, I keep it pretty simple, like bone or a Wakasagi color. Something that's kind of bait fish oriented is basically what I'm looking for here. So, you know, something like this would be a great option, but some kind of plopping sound is what I'm looking for. So number one, buzzbait, plopper, that's where I start. All right, if they're not eating that, I still want to cover ground really fast, because the most important part of this season is being around fish. There could be a lot of dead water in between one good bank, one school of fish, another good bank, right? So we got to cover a lot of ground. The best way to do that is with something that you can burn and that you can fish really fast, okay? So for me, my 1-2 kind of burning approach is a skinny dipper and a spinnerbait. These are my favorite baits to just fish super fast and burn. You guys might find other baits that work well. You could fish, you know, like a Megabass Sonic side, some kind of square bill, something, you know, whatever you guys like. You can even do it with a buzzbait to a certain extent. But I find that a dipper in a burning spinnerbait, I can pretty much take anywhere around the country. I mean, we've done this here in Arizona, we've done this in New York, we've done it in Florida, we've done it everywhere we've gone, and it works this time of the year. This is a great 1-2 punch. So spinnerbait, pretty simple. You cast it and you wind it in, you burn it, right? Dipper is really my favorite bait this time of the year for largemouth and smallmouth, okay? And we talk about the dipper usually a couple times a year. It's always around this time. Dipper is going to look on the surface a lot like any other paddle tail, you know, swim bait, but there's something special about a dipper that just works so incredibly well on a burn. Okay, so this is a bait that you're gonna throw out, you're gonna let it sink just for a second, and then you're gonna start swimming it as fast as you can to where it doesn't break the surface of the water. You literally want this bait right here. This bait has kind of a ribbed, grooved back. It will at times spin on you. You know, traditionally with a paddle tail swim bait, you want it to be keeled and have this really nice movement. You don't want it to like drift to the side or roll. Dipper doesn't seem to freaking matter. You're just going super fast to where the fish literally just see something burning past them and they have that fast to react to it, right? They're chilling in a tree and all of a sudden they know something's around, they look up and there's just something burning by and they go and crush it. I would highly recommend using a stinger hook. In fact, we made a video where we kind of break down the dipper. If Jeff remembers, he'll put a link up here somewhere. If you guys want to see the exact rigging, but essentially it's a twist lock hook, a red treble hook on the back, and that's it. It's a simple rigging. This works great in ponds. It works great in rivers. It works great in lakes. I mean, we've thrown this in Lake Ontario, right? Lake Huron. We've thrown it in, you know, small little ponds, urban stuff. So it's just a great bait, and it's relatively inexpensive. You can grab a couple colors. I usually just go with white and then something like a natural shad color. Again, if you guys are around bluegill, you might incorporate like a green pumpkin or sprayed grass or something like that. But this will allow me to cover ground super fast, cover a lot of bank, and really get a sense and a feel for where fish are active. All right, a lot of days, I don't have to go past that, right? So that's the great thing about this time of the year is a lot of times you can find super active fish shallow and you're done. Between the buzzbait, the dipper, you kind of covered everything. But a lot of times they're just not chasing for whatever reason. It could be a high pressure system. It could be maybe just the day is like super calm. It might just be, I don't know, pressure, mood, right? So sometimes I know there's fish in areas and they're not relating to my fast stuff. I just want to slow down, stay shallow, pick it apart, but go to more of a slow, you know, thorough type approach, okay? And Jeff, I'm gonna let you chime in here because you're super good at this approach. And I know this is something that you love to do, right? So for me, when I'm talking about this approach, I'm talking about usually one of a couple of baits, okay? It could be something like a wake bait, where I'm still staying really high, but I'm fishing slower and more methodical. It could be something like, 6-inch mag is great this time of the year, especially if you're around a bunch of docks, right? This could be a great one to kind of skip and just slowly fish through docks. Again, down those same edges, running bank. It could be kind of a bigger soft plastic that you still get to move and manipulate like a bull flat. But it's also a great time of the year to reintroduce a glide bait into your arsenal, okay? And Jeff, I'm gonna let you chime in here if you don't mind. Talk to me about this season, and this is kind of like the beginning of your season, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
The
I mean,
transition's like pretty key for me because it's a really fun bite, and I found that when it comes down to what you were talking about earlier, which was like shad, when they feel like, okay, the water's starting to cool, the moon phase is coming around, we're gonna move shallow. It's a quick thing, and once you find where the shad are doing that, it might be on a bank, it might be on a wall, but once you find where that is, the fish are gonna be there and they're gonna be eating them. But I found that sometimes they're just not super juiced, where they're like, where I can fish the glide bait super fast and they're just coming up and eating it. I found that time and time again, slowing down seems to get more bites this time of year for me. So you kind of glide the bait, let it hang there for a second, glide the bait, let it hang there for a second, glide, let it hang, and on those hangs you get those bites. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if the fish just aren't juice or pressure or something like that, but just time and time again, it seems that the slower you go, the more bites you get. And these windows are small.
Yeah.
I mean, it's normally first thing in the morning because you had a colder night.
Yep.
So the temperature drops just a little bit.
So those fish moved up.
Yep.
Maybe they're not committed to staying there all day.
No, definitely not all day.
Yep.
It's a very short, it's like an hour, 2 hour window, and you
Yep.
gotta hit it first thing. If you don't, you miss out and you lose out and catching fish. So it's a quick thing this time of year. It's a quick window, but you fish slow.
Right.
To get your bites. So
Right.
it's a very cool dynamic between, you fishing normally other times of the year and now. So.
Yeah. It's a really fun time of the year.
It is.
But not every day are they going to be super juiced and super aggressive.
Yeah.
They can be, and hopefully they are, and we can just burn bank and cover a ton of ground and catch 50 fish in a day.
Right.
But, getting back to what you're saying, there are times when there should be fish in an area, right? Because you've seen bait, you've seen shad, and literally like what Jeff was saying, a school of shad can be in 40 feet, summering off a ledge, and then all of a sudden get a sense like, dude, it's happening up there. For a school of shad to move from 40 feet to the bank, it takes like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So when you think of like, one day you're out there deep cranking in 40 feet and there's shad everywhere, the whole night went, and then you go out the next morning, that 8 or 9 or 10 hours of time is more than enough time for shad to go from deep to being all over the bank. So if you guys are in your summer mode and all of a sudden you're like, where the hell did they go? Like, there's just bait balls everywhere and schools of fish everywhere, and I don't even see them anymore. They could literally be like in inches of water, just loving life right now, right? That's where something like this can really play on those first fish that kind of move up and they're not really with the program yet.
Yeah.
They might not even be schooled. They might have been schooled out, deep for the summer, and then all of a sudden, a couple of them are like, dude, I'm gonna go follow those, and they follow, and all of a sudden they don't have their buddies with them.
All right.
And so they're just kind of like sitting by a stump or a rock or in shade or something, and they're just still kind of feeling it out. And something like this is just kind of moving really slow, can trigger some great strikes, and you can get some really good fish. So I know you're not much of a color guy, but are you more in shad tones this time of the year?
100%.
Okay.
Something that's like a bone white or something that's pretty visible to me, because again, this is first light.
Okay.
So having that bone color I'm able to see exactly what the bait is doing. So
Yep.
out on the cast.
Okay.
And I also think it helps the fish as well.
So
I
just
think-
something that's more visible.
Yeah, more visible.
Is better.
It's pretty cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So there you go. There's step 3. It keeps you shallow, just forces you to slow down. But you guys are gonna have to figure out where you are, what works. Jeff may be digging the glide bait, and a lot of you may be able to apply a lot of the same, glide bait tactics that Jeff's using. Magdraft can be a great option, the soft plastic. So play with a few different things and see what works for you, but that should allow you to kind of give yourself kind of a 1, 2, 3 shallow approach. All right, if the shallow stuff's just not happening, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Then the next best thing for me is a deep crank. Okay, now I love deep cranking. It's one of my favorite ways. Sometimes I actually almost hope that the shallow thing's not happening so that I can find them on the deep crank, because my belief is that the deep crank is going to catch the biggest fish in the lake. I think for me personally, the majority of my giant, double-digit plus fish have been on a deep crank. And I think if we've talked about this before, I think if you polled the entire world for fish between 10 and 20 pounds, I bet you a deep crank is number 1. Maybe not, but it's right there. You're shaking your head yes.
It's up there.
You agree.
For a hard bait.
For a hard bait.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about deep cranking for a minute. And a lot of guys, I lose a lot of you at deep cranking because you're like, I'm fishing from shore, but I'm going to talk about that as well, okay? So when I'm deep cranking this time of the year, I'm looking for basically schools of fish. Okay, now you can certainly look for just one fish if you want to do that. If you're a Panoptics guy or a live scope guy and you just want to look up, there's a fish by a boulder and throw to it, you can do that. But if you're not that guy, I'm looking for areas that will potentially have schools of fish. So I'm looking for rock piles, humps, point breaks, channel bends, somewhere where a school of fish can set up around a bunch of bait and they can pick it off whenever they're ready to pick it off. And a deep crank is a great thing to throw through those fish because a lot of times those fish aren't super active. So they might have that same kind of chill vibe as Jeff's shallow glide bait fish, but throwing a deep crank oftentimes just triggers them to strike when they didn't really want to strike because it's moving through fast. It might hit a rock and bounce off, and there might be some kind of deflection that just causes a fish to really instinctively just kind of grab it, and before you know it, you've got one on. And once one's hooked, a lot of times the whole school kind of triggers and you can go for it, right? So baits that I really like to throw this time of the year, the Big M 7.5, the Blitz Magnum EX DR, these are two of my favorites. The reason why I prefer these over, say, something like a 10XD this time of the year is because I want the bait to have a tighter action. So 10XD is a real wide action. It might work great for a lot of you guys where you guys are. You could also add in the Duo, the G87, the 20A to this because it's a tighter movement. But the Blitz Magnum EX DR is going to give you a tight movement. So this is a bait that's going to come through. It's going to be super tight. It's just a much more shad-like tight movement. And it's super buoyant and it gets really deep. So you can fish this in at 30 feet. If you get a snag, you can just chill. And most of the time it floats off. I think when these first came out, the first like 6 weeks that Griff used this, I think you had one bait that you broke off like a dozen times, and you just waited for it to float back up.
Yeah, you just break it off and wait.
Because we had samples, it's not like we had 20 a piece, we had one each, right? And Griff would snag it in a tree or a rock in 30 feet, like shit. And he would just cut, break it off, and you just wait. And the thing eventually would like, boop, pop up, there it is. Go get it.
It makes like a little wake, so you know. It's so big it creates a lot of commotion on the water.
Yeah. So, don't be afraid about throwing a big bait. Sometimes they get stuck and you lose them, and that's just how deep cranking goes. But these two baits allow me to really pick apart water, I would say, from 10 to 30 feet. This is something that I'm going to throw, try to start grinding in 10, 15 feet and work down to 30 feet. This is where I like to be. I go back and forth between these two. The Big M is going to give you a flashing motion, so it's going to give you a lot of this side to side. The Blitz is going to give you just a tighter, kind of a tight pitch type action, okay? Colors, I keep it pretty simple. This is something where I want a really clear pattern for clear water. Something maybe with some chartreuse or blue, like citrus shad's really good this time of the year. And then an IU pattern. I'm gonna circle back to this IU pattern here in a second. Now, if you guys are fishing a place where deep is, say, 15 to 20 feet, right? Then throwing a 30-foot diver is not gonna make a lot of sense. So, or maybe the fish have transitioned. There's some that are shallow, some that are deep, and they're kind of chilling in that 15, 18-foot range. Then that's where I'm gonna throw something like a Megabass Deep Six. This is a great one. Deep X 200 is a great one for this time of the year. And then like a Blitz EX DR or Max DR. Okay, something like that. Something that's gonna start picking apart that 14, 15-foot range. These would all be great options for this time of the year. And again, color-wise, I kind of keep it the same. You can start playing with some chartreuses, right? So chartreuse and blue is a great color in the fall. It really, something about it's kind of a shad type color. So any of that can be good. If you guys are in a pond, just go to like a Blitz DR or a Blitz MR. So deep is gonna be relative, right? All I'm trying to do is I'm looking for something offshore that a school of fish is gonna be hanging at to feed if they haven't quite moved to the bank yet. That's all we're looking for, okay? Now, really quick, I wanna go back to IU colors, because this is something that Griff actually showed me a while ago, and it's something, Jeff, you and I talk about colors a lot, and I know you're not a huge color guy, but you do love IU colors, okay? IU is a bait fish in Japan. So anytime you see a bait that's colored like an IU, like this is a Megabass I Slide in an IU color, this is a Blitz Magnum EX DR in Impact IU, right? They're designed and colored after the bait fish in Japan, but I wanted to show you guys something. This is our #1 selling color in Lucky Craft LC crankbaits. This is gizzard shad. If you guys fish around gizzard shad, threadfin, it doesn't really matter. But most gizzard shad are gonna have kind of like an olive greenish type hue, some gold, some pearl, right? It's the same freaking color. See that? I mean, there's a slight, this has a chartreuse dot, this has a black dot, but a good IU pattern and a good gizzard shad pattern are very, very similar. They have a lot of the same tones, and that's why IU can work so good here in the US, is because it imitates a lot of the bait. Even though we don't have IU swimming around our lake, it has the same tones and the same shading as what a gizzard shad would be. When they get into the greener tones, it's gonna look a lot like a threadfin shad, or even there's a lot of gizzard shad that have that green tone too, right? So don't be afraid of IU colors. They're some of the best ones. Like in fact, like this color is one of the best colors for like our Salt River chain of lakes that we have out here, because there's tons of gizzard shad. Those big fish feed on them all the time. It's the most gizzard shaddy. This is more gizzard shad than this, right? Even though this says shad in it, this is the better one, right? So don't be afraid of some of these colors. Use it to your advantage. I'm a huge color guy. I got to make up, I got a yin and yang with Jeff, right? So there you go. All right, finally, if they're not biting what I want to catch them on, right, which is everything we just talked about, while I'm out fishing the deep crank, I am going to pay attention to my electronics, okay? So whether you are a live scoper or you're just looking at, you know, down imaging or 360 or whatever it is that you're looking at, I'm always kind of paying attention to my electronics so I understand what's happening in the universe below me, right? So a lot of times I will see schools of fish deep, and they're not necessarily laid up on a rock pile or somewhere where I can really use the deep crank as a tool. They're just sitting in a ditch. They're maybe around a big bunch of bait ball. Maybe I'm seeing slashes going through them, and they're schooled up deep and they're feeding offshore, okay? That's where I will transition from a crank and go to more of a vertical presentation and go with some type of spoon, okay? Some type of deep spoon. Now for me, I prefer more of a compact, smaller, faster sinking jigging spoon. Something like a drag metal from Duo. Megabass makes a bait called a Makippa. Something that I can drop down vertically and get down really quick, and I can just kind of lift and let it fall back through. I'm just trying to lift and drop this thing so it's shooting up and then it's kind of falling back, but it's all happening quick to where I'm just trying to get a reaction strike out of fish that are actively feeding offshore, okay? If they're feeding on bigger things, then you could go with more of a gizzard shad type look. A lot of your fish might be feeding on barfish or white bass or baby stripers even. So Gurkha knife is usually my go-to with a flutter spoon. You could use, you know, Lake Fork spoon. There's a bunch of different big spoons in here, so you can play with it and see what you like. This is gonna give me more of a hard, giant flutter down. So this is more of a specific thing when they're really feeding on big bait. If they're eating 6 to 8 inch fish, you're probably not gonna drop this and catch them. They probably don't give a shit, right? If they're eating threadfin shad, they're probably not gonna wanna eat this, right? So you kind of have to figure out, match the hatch a little bit, figure out what they're eating, and match your presentation to it. But if you're from a boat, you're paying attention to electronics, somewhere in here is the no-brainer. If you guys are fishing from shore and you don't have the advantage of electronics, but you know, dude, there's fish in this hole, or maybe you're fishing a river or a creek, and you're like, dude, they gotta be in this current seam that drops down because we've fished all the shallow areas, they're not there, right? I would recommend switching more to like a blade bait style, okay? So I don't use these so much on the lakes this time of the year because I really want more of a vertical, fast presentation. And this style bait, for me, just sinks too slow. It's not aggressive enough. But from shore, this is a great one that you can fish and you can kind of hop through. It doesn't snag as much because usually they're double hooks on there. So even as you pull up and over cover, the hooks tend to fold, so you're not usually snagging them as much as you would something with a treble hook. And it's something that will help you just kind of yo-yo and pick apart the bottom of a pond, of a river, of a creek. And you can get different weights. If you're super shallow, you can go with like a 1/4 ounce, right? If you're a little deeper, you can go 3/8 or a half or something like that. Or you guys might be fishing a lake, even that deep water is 10, 15 feet. Something like a blade bait could be a great addition to your arsenal. But that will allow me to kind of pick those deeper fish apart if they're not aggressive. Obviously, I want to catch them on the reaction stuff because it's more fun. But dude, I've been on some unbelievable spoon bites. If you can get on fish on these deeper spoons, something like a Makippa or that drag metal, and they're in a huge school, you can a lot of times just sit on one spot for hours and just catch them every drop down. A lot of times it's a mixed bag. It's largemouth, smallmouth, stripers. It's kind of like ocean fishing in a way where you don't really know what you're going to bring up. It could be a lot of fun. So try that. All right, guys, that is a wrap. That is the approach. I know we talked about a ton of different baits, but I wanted to make it a broad enough conversation to where you don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself or rut yourself into one bait, right? So for a lot of you, it's going to come down to just trying some different things. You know, maybe try this, try the different thing, try the glide, try the mag, try the buzzbait, try the plopper. You're gonna have to get confidence in things, but hopefully this gives you kind of a starting point to where you can kind of, you know, pick 3 or 4 things and at least attack it and give yourself some kind of plan and game plan to the day. If you guys have questions on anything that we talked about, from baits to colors to techniques to speeds to whatever, drop it down below and I will get answers for you guys. Jeff will put links to the products in there if you guys want to check them out closer. The biggest thing is go have some fun, right? Finally, we're almost, or we are, to the end of hell, right? So let's enjoy outside, go have some fun, catch a bunch of fish. Some of the biggest fish of the year are going to happen right now because they've spent all summer feeding, so you guys can jack them really good. So on behalf of myself, Jeff, Griff, everybody here at the Hookup Tackle guys, thank you for giving us time. Thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for the support, and hopefully we'll see you on the water. Peace.